Was the filming like an experience too? Like, was that something they would have allowed in the Air Force at that time, or was it like, holy crap, I can't believe they're
Not at all.
letting us do this?
I, I was still a relatively new guy. I was amazed you were even letting the new Air Force guy, who you still really didn't know, even fly in it. But I thought you were a bunch of knuckleheads at the time. I had no idea that it would pay off so awesomely for the Navy and the Air Force. The movie turned out to be a recruiting tool, not just for the Navy.
Yeah, I just wanted to give kudos to Boa because we had I don't know if it was a battle. Sex has a different memory of this, but try, trying to get the Air Force, first Air Force guy on the staff. But for those of you who don't know, Top Gun's run by JOs, O3s mainly. And Sex, after we finish this, you might want to have your little conversation about your first AOM and stuff. But Boa, when we got him on the staff, I mean, we were still fighting Vietnam at Top Gun, and we were trying to get the old bros to come into the real world with all aspect weapons and stuff. And it was like pulling teeth. And Boa was instrumental in that, man, and helping out because the Air Force at that time was well ahead of us in all aspect weaponry. And so kudos to Boa. I think he really brought a lot to the staff, and I think everybody would agree with that. So
you guys have watched it change for a long time. How is it? How did it change during your time at Top Gun?
It changed a lot for me. I was there for 4 years, and that's a long time to be a Top Gun. The best set of orders I got were orders to come to Top Gun as instructor. The next best set of orders were my orders to leave. It's all consuming when you're there and you're in the middle of that. I certainly will reflect on what Organ was saying about Mike Straight and having him on the staff, and how really I hesitate to use the description behind the power curve we were when I first got there in terms of teaching to the past. But the place still was kind of a dogfight academy, if you will, when I walked in the door. And it was a badge of honor, without question, to be able to conduct yourself with talent and skill in that arena. But of course, things were changing so quickly in terms of the broader aspect of air combat that where we were in teaching at a graduate level really needed to change to keep the school relevant. And I would say that, at least in my experience, it was the acquisition of the F-16 that really fostered the acceleration of that reality within the staff members as a whole. You've flown the Jets Mover, and you know what I'm talking about. These were Block 30 F-16s that at the time were the highest thrust to weight, furthest aft CG F-16s ever made. They had the APG-66 up in the nose. That had actually better processors than the ones that were in the A model. So they were quite fast radars, ALR-69 raw gear, and just a remarkable performing airplane. And we took delivery of them in the Thunderbird configuration. We didn't even buy drop tanks initially. So they were just phenomenal. And it took a month or two or three to get past the awesomeness of the jet's aerodynamic capacity. But what really started to change everything was the weapon system. We now have an airplane. Picture this: we're flying A4s and F5s, no radars, one radio, and a TACAN. That's it. And every time I think of that and think about the kind of flying we used to do on flogger days and stuff, where we had to just listen. We couldn't say anything unless it was a safety of flight. And yet we were able to do it day in and day out. It's just remarkable. But when we get the Viper, the situational awareness that this airplane brings to the show was overwhelming to us. And once we began to really assimilate it and get used to it, collectively, we really began to see as a group that things were going to have to change, because the Hornet was coming on in numbers now. The airplane they are directly comparable in so many ways. They each have their strengths, but both those aircraft basically perform in the same way. So how we're going to teach has to change, and specifically, we can't just teach from a bogey driver's perspective. We've got to be out there in the formation with these guys to do that. And when Brack came along and closed Miramar, at least as far as the Navy's concerned, and sent Top Gun up to Fallon, you put those two ingredients together, and that really began to bring us up to a level that I think the current guys at Top Gun have very admirably done. The product that those guys are producing right now is spectacular. And the way the Navy is using that graduate now is also says a lot about how they've incorporated all of that. So the airplane was a big deal. It was a joy to fly it, but it also just changed the way we thought about doing the business.
You guys, did it not have a Flickus limiter or something? You guys were pulling 10 Gs with that thing. How
you could,
was just
you could
override
go
the
through
limit?
Yeah, we could. There'd be times you'd come home and you'd see 10 on the airplane, and we went to GD, to General Dynamics, and said, "Hey, look, we need some kind of a G management program that you guys need to provide us with. We don't want to wreck these airplanes." And they just laughed at us and told us, "Look, you don't understand. These jets are purpose built for this. The wings have been all cold soaked, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff." And we just looked at each other and said, "Okay." And and what was it? 2 or 3 years later, the cracks are starting to show up, and the jets didn't last that long. At least for us, that's a whole other story. But because of it, but yeah, we were very aggressive with them. No doubt about that.
Do you guys remember when the FIs went down for wing cracks?
Yeah, the Longerons.
It's the same sort of thing, and they said, "Well, the Air Force is not having wing cracks." And we
actually, they were having wing cracks, but the way the Air Force approached that program was different. They're in a program of crack management. You manage the cracks. Yeah. NavAir, being NavAir, they were like, no, we don't manage cracks. We just don't tolerate them. You can only going to stop drill them so many times and that kind of stuff. So
I remember I was in Yuma and got a call from them saying, "You got one flight to bring the jet back." And then for about 6 months, we had to do Gs. We had to write down how many Gs, how long, this and that. And this is true. No offense, Bo, or even you, Mover, but at the end of the 6 months, as I recall, it's been a while, the study came back and said, the reason the Navy's having more problems is they fly the airplanes harder than the Air Force. So you can leave that in, Mover, or not. But that's what the conclusion on the end of it was, because the Air Force, if they were having any Circus, it wasn't as many as ours. I mean, as much damage. But we flew those things so damn hard all the time,
Definitely.
I can see why we had those cracks. But anyway.
I'll end my discussion in terms of how the school changed, really tipping my hat to Bo in this sense. When he says we were a bunch of knuckleheads, in a certain respect, we kind of were. This is a guy that's an Eagle driver. He flies F-15s and coming into this to what we were at the time. And I can only imagine what that must have been like for him, having, been an Eagle driver, C model Mississippi C, for God's sake. And he comes in and he's watching the show that we're doing the best we can with. Don't misinterpret me, but we had a long way to go.
A little context, guys, is I thought the movie was crazy, distracting from the normal business. The Air Force never would have done that with the law, and that's why the Air Force has never made or helped make a movie that could help everybody, like the Top Guns that have come out. The Air Force can't do that. It doesn't have the flexibility. It is such a bureaucratic monster, and you guys had the flexibility to get that done. I came in with a different point of view and a different background, and I tried to just shut up for most of the first year until I figured out why you guys did what you did. And once I understood, it made total sense. But at first, boy, you guys would have been scared with having me on your wing, knowing how clueless I was out there. But then I watched you guys rapidly adapt and start evolving. You just grabbed it and ran with it. I went to Nellis for the next assignment and tried to incite a little bit of that looking forward and start changing from the way things have been. And boy, I got it to budge that much. And you guys just totally reinvented the world in a very short time. So you guys were way more adaptive than the world I came from.
Yeah, just to support Boa's point, Boa brought many of these concepts into the school and kept emphasizing them until, the knuckleheads would listen. But at the end of the day, during that span of time through the mid 80s, airplanes aside, we transitioned to division tactics level issues. We began to do some night fighter work. If you remember, FARP and SFARP were being advanced. Overland air superiority with Navy air wings was an adaptation where we were teaching kind of part task strike fighter tactics with the Air Force or with the air wings. This was all the collective at Top Gun, generally the JOs, trying to imagine what would advance the school and what would advance the service in the best way. And we actually, we took a class away per year, if you recall, because we were being pulled in so many directions to begin to go beyond just the power projection course. But I would agree with Boa. We were adaptable in that regard. But I also agree totally that he brought a perspective of professionalism and of just the division tactics alone. His idea of four ship tactics and stuff. He brought concepts into the school that we should have been considering and weren't. And then we were able to pick up on his lead and advance some of those things.
Did they give you any kind of like, here's what this means in Air Force speak, here's what this means in Navy speak, or did they just throw you in? Like,
I think so, we just threw him in.
The first time, I don't know if this is a thing, but the first time somebody pumped their nose, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'm going to go out to a mile line and abreast. And they're like, where are you going? Why are you a mile out there? That's the rejoin signal. I'm like, that's 180 out.
It was disturbing at first because all the givens of little hand signals or aircraft signals or whatever else were totally different. And so the assumption on both sides is, well, shoot, we're just going to go fly formation, get out there. Holy cow. I had to watch and make sure I was carefully watching all the time and not taking anything for granted because I realized I didn't know anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was a battle getting going.
You guys would have been very nervous to know how clueless I was on your wing.
Hey, Secks, tell the story tell the story about bringing Boa aboard. That's one of the better stories, staff stories.
When I first my first staff meeting at Top Gun, when I checked in, I was real confused. I'm used to coming from a Marine squadron. The CO always run everything, made all the decisions. Everybody just fell in line. I get to my first Top Gun staff meeting. It's like a huge argument. I'm not even sure what they were discussing, but I knew the CO didn't have much to say about it. It was just all the O3s and a few O4s that were there, and then they voted on it. And where the vote come is what we did. And so Arnie Christensen Ratchet was a CO at the time, and he obviously looked at me and said I was a little confused. So after the meeting, he said, "Secks, come on down to the office. Let me talk to you a little bit." So I walked down to his office, sit down, and he says, "It looks like you're a little confused on how Top Gun is run." I said, "Oh, yes, sir." I said, "I'm used to the CO just being in charge of everything." He says, "Well, can't do that here. You can't have one person, this commanding officer, make all the decisions for all of fleet naval aviation, fighter aviation." So we put the best and the brightest here. We discuss it. We vote on it. And the only time I can say anything if it comes to a tie. Well, never ever came to a tie where he could break the tie. And so we fast forward to we have to make a decision on an Air Force guy. And at the time, Boomer Wilson, God rest his soul, was a CO. And the Air Force was had called him and told him that there's an exchange billet available for Top Gun, and the Air Force has filled all the ones on their exchange billets from the Navy and the Marine Corps, but Top Gun hasn't filled theirs. And if they don't fill it, they're going to start not filling the ones on the Air Force squadrons. And so what they wanted to send us was an F-5 adversary pilot. And obviously, the training department, I was a training officer at the time, said, no, we don't want an F-5 adversary pilot. We need somebody that's been to the Air Force Fighter Weapons School, F-15 guy, that understands forward quarter BBR tactics, because we were so far behind what the Air Force has already done. But the Air Force said he couldn't do that, couldn't afford it. And so we had a staff meeting, and we discussed it. And then we voted on it. And about 1/3 of the staff wouldn't even vote. So you got to make a decision. So they finally voted on it, and the people that wanted the Air Force guy, F-15 guy, won the fight. So Boomer said, come on, Secks, come down to the office when I call the Air Force and let them know. So he gets on the phone, and everything that we'd said about why we needed an F-15 guy with fighter weapons school background. We said, first off, you can't come to Top Gun as an instructor if you didn't go through Top Gun as a student. That's a requirement. So why are we going to take an Air Force guy that hasn't been to their fighter weapons school? So every argument we used, he regurgitated to the Air Force like that was his sole mission in life, to do that. And that's how we ended up with Boa on the staff. So we brought him to the staff for one particular reason, to get the Navy on board with forward quarter BBR tactics, because the Air Force was years ahead of us in that arena. And I tell you what, he was amazing in how far we traveled in just a couple years in putting out beyond visual range forward quarter tactics. But he was responsible for all that. He had all the background for it. So that's how we ended up with Boa. We didn't know he didn't know what was going on, because most of us when we first got there didn't know what was going on. Till you fly a few classes as just a wingman, and you kind of sort of get into the hang of what is happening. But he was amazing. He did all that himself. He was the first instructor that did BBR tactics for the classes, and all that came from all his work with the Air Force and bringing that to our school.
I remember us working on something. I think I was in the training office at the time, and we had the staff X call, kind of unplanned staff X. So we go all in there. Boomer shows up and says, "We got an Air Force exchange guy, and he's gonna." I don't remember all the details like you do, Secks, about who they were going to send, but I remember a total revolt of the idea. It wasn't just a no, and it wasn't just a hell no. It was as an NF way, where you were bringing an Air Force guy in. We all adjourned. Boomer stomps off down to his office. 20 minutes goes by. He brings us all back into the staff X and says, "He's coming, whether you like it or not." And I don't remember how he took it after that, but that was one time when I thought that Boomer, or the skipper of the squadron, actually put his foot down to the deference of the staff. Ricky, you remember it any other way?
Yeah, well, I had kind of a similar recall from you, Tex, because as I recall, there was half of us that wanted, what harm would it do to bring in an Air Force guy, and maybe he's got something we can use, and vice versa. And the old bros, not going to mention their name, but the old bros who ruled, the longer you've been at Top Gun, you kind of have another extra vote, so to speak, but not in the end game. But there were a couple of them that were adamant about, we don't need an Air Force guy. Why? What are you talking about? And it's like, and so we had to break through that. And I think that's probably that time that Boomer said, you know what, we're going to do this, and took the bull by the horn, so to speak.
When I showed up, there was no indication to me that there was a question. The great care you guys took of myself and Dottie. All of that, it was not apparent at all that there was any conflict as I rolled in the door. So you hit it well.
It didn't hide it. That's how Top Gun is run. Once the decision is made, everybody gets on board. And it's like that was the decision the staff made. That's the best decision for naval fighter aviation. and everybody got on board like it was their decision all along. And that's what makes it so special.
Mike, do you remember when you lost your canopy in the F5?
I remember how fast my wingman got away from me. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. But in the end, when we all got really close to you, I was one of them. I remember this, and everybody kind of clusters next to you because we were really worried about you, man, and just didn't want to leave you, even though we that had nothing to do with what was going to happen. I just remember this feeling of this is one of our guys, and look at this. We got to get him back, and you got yourself back, but all of us just wanted to get as close to you as we could. Realized we were just in the way actually, and kind of moved ourselves out. But that has always stuck with me, watching you in that airplane and going, "Oh man, we've got to get him back to the field here." But you did obviously a great job and landed the airplane, but it was just this moment where you being in the Air Force had nothing to do with it. You know, you're one of us, and that was it.
My first mistake was I immediately ran the seat all the way down. Well, you know how freaking short I am already.
I remember you putting your hand out into the wind stream.
Well, and so that was the other challenge, to keep myself from trying to put my hand out and just see.
You know, we talked about how Top Gun has changed. Did the movie change anything for you guys as far as like how you saw yourself? I mean, in general, did it make you more proud, less proud? Did it actually have any effect on a day-to-day operation, or was it pretty much business as usual?
The day-to-day operation changed. That's for darn sure. The movie, you know, I don't think any of us may have, but knew that it was going to be the phenomenon that it became. And one of the things that sticks in my mind is every day we'd come to work and you'd walk up the ladder to the squadron spaces upstairs, and down the full length of the hall, which ran almost the length of the hangar, stacks of cardboard boxes would begin to show up. And the Master Chief, who was in charge of our coffee mess, he ended up selling all kinds of stuff: Top Gun nightgowns, Top Gun toothbrushes, Top Gun. I mean, you name it, ball caps.
Merchandising.
And he was good at it. And after a while, I mean, we were signing hats in the Red Room. Here, you got to sign this nightgown here, and you got to sign this hat. And we're like, what? What are you talking about? That's one's going to Nancy Reagan. Nancy Reagan gets this one, and Ron's going to get this one. It was just out of control, and Top Gun became this destination for some reporters and the rich and famous. You know, if you're in San Diego, you're going to go to Top Gun so you can sort of touch these guys and stuff like that. So, you know, I'm making it sound like we just hated it. There was a part of it that we didn't hate, of course, but it made just the day-to-day job a little bit more than it otherwise would have been. So there was an element of that we kind of had to deal with. But I'm you know, talking about microscopic stuff in the big scheme of things. But I don't think any of us ever saw that coming.
Was it like a flyover where you're just hoping to break even, or like when it's finally said and done, were you kind of excited? Like at that point, even after you'd watched it, you know, when you're starting to see how popular it is, what did you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we all enjoyed seeing the hype, you know, that the movie generated, and to see it succeed. I don't remember the cardboard boxes, and you know, I have no doubt that you know that we were merchandising and stuff. But, you know, I've always kind of looked back on the school as pretty clean in terms of being able to compartmentalize something like the movie and get back to the business of the school. And if you look at what was accomplished at Top Gun in 1985 and in 1986, and you know, those years, we were doing a lot professionally in our business, and and maybe it helped our credibility a bit. I mean, we were dealing at the air wing level with super CAGs, if some of you remember that. So we were having to deal as we became an Echelon 2 command, which was an elevation for the school, answering to the CNO, and actually, we got some money out of it. So, I mean, the school was so busy that the movie certainly didn't hurt our reputation, but I never saw the professionalism of the staff waver from it. I think we enjoyed seeing the movie succeed, I guess is the way I'd put it.
Bo, when you went back to the Air Force, did they kind of give you any flack about the movie itself? I mean, was it kind of like, oh, it's the Top Gun guy, or was it, hey, lessons learned? What was kind of how they treated you when you came back?
You guys took care of Dot and took her with you to that premiere showing, but I had already left. I was in Florida getting recalled in the F-15, and the group down there, a squadron that was deployed shooting missiles, grabbed me and drugged me to the movie to go see it, and they were all, favorably impressed. So yeah, right from the get-go, there was never any negative at all about the movie.
Oregon, was the shirtless volleyball your idea?
Oh, yeah, right.
No. It's amazing how they pasted Val Kilmer's head on your body, Ricky.
Yeah. I saw him zoning out down there, I mean, so just to be clear, you guys don't have showers in your locker, like when you're getting dressed to go fly, right? I mean, that's not a Top Gun thing, because I've never been in a squadron that took a shower, right? Like that was news to me.
Well, these guys don't take showers, number one. So there was never a point.
Exactly.
The one thing I remember, and like I said, about the volleyball scene was I was watching it, and I don't know if y'all probably don't relate to this part, because Andy Caputi and I had both gotten to Top Gun together, and he got picked up by the Blues. And the day I was watching him film the volleyball scene, someone came up and said, "Hey, the Blues just had an accident, and Truman was involved." I said, "Oh man, is he okay?" And he said, "Yeah, he got out, but the other guy didn't." And I looked it up just to see. That was July 13th, 1985. That date, so I can correlate when they filmed that volleyball scene to the Blues accident that year. But anyway, Truman's still with us, so that's good news. Dink is not, and that's a tragedy, but part of the business, I guess. Is there anything else you guys would like to talk about from that time frame, 85, 86? I mean, it was a very pivotal time for, like Brat's already alluded to, for Naval, Marine Corps, hell, fighter aviation in general. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up, recollections? Willie,
one of the things that I think ought to be pointed out is we advanced in our workload during that period of time, especially as the movie wound down, and we're really trying to change the course of what we teach through the course. How many instructors did we have at that point, Ricky?
While I was there, we went down to 9 pilots at one time. We generally had between 3 or 4 Rios with that, but the most we ever had was right about the time of the filming. And Pyro was on board. Pyro was the only one on the staff that didn't fly in the movie because he was still going through training in the airplane. So I think 14 or 15, you guys can jump in here, was the most pilots we had at any one time. It was a very small staff when you think about it. So
a lot of work for a few people, and right now the staff is like 35 pilots, I think, on the current staff.
That's one of the things that the questions for the group, if anybody wants to jump in, was what else did Top Gun do besides the collapse? Circus, you remember? What you want to jump in on that?
Oh my gosh, Rat's been talking about that, and he's probably not even mentioned them all. We were doing. People were gone all the time between the FARPs, going up to Fallon to support the air wings. We would take airplanes to the East Coast to support the Marine Corps. It was just going on and on, not to mention subject matter expert visits to Johns Hopkins in places like that. I remember Redbone and I going out there, and I could go on and on. there was so much more than just the class, and the class took a lot to get ready for and orchestrate, run, debrief, get ready for the next one. But when you started throwing all that other stuff in the blender, and everybody, again, like he's been talking about, you would stay focused because that's what we did. But it was intense. There's no question about it. And I remember that in particular at the end of my fourth year. I was full, but it was certainly not because we weren't doing some amazing things and all of us kind of pulling on the oars in the same direction, because we were. And to say the least, we got a lot done.
I do remember one little break that Top Gun would take is taking some F5s down to Key West and shooting Banner. I'm not sure that played into the big picture, but I'm very thankful you guys took the Air Force guy down there. The Air Force doesn't shoot Banner, so painting bullets old school and shooting at banners, that was pretty cool.
If you you guys remember Carrot, Bob Fulton?
Yeah.
Very well.
We worked so much, we had maxed out, or we couldn't take leave because we had the classes to do, and in between classes we were going to the East Coast all over the place, so it was really hard to take leave. We usually got a little bit of time off at Christmas, and if you were at work at Miramar, then you were expected to fly with the local fighters. And so Carrot finally figured out that if you can take leave and go to work. So if you take leave, you take leave and go to work and do all the stuff to get ready for the next class and do your lecture prep and stuff. But you can't fly if you're on leave. So he would come in and they say, Carrot, Professor, I'm on leave. And so that's what we started doing. Just take leave, and then you can go to work and you call up on your paperwork, but you can't fly if you're on leave. So that's how we kind of managed to use up our leave so we didn't lose it, because over 60 days, you just lose your leave.
It was so busy. I mean, every weekend we'd see everyone because we'd all be there working on something. If we weren't flying, we were working on lectures or the next class or projects or whatever. But I think that's the way that made Top Gun. I mean, the individuals here made it, but that work ethic was really what makes Top Gun what it is. And man, I tell you what, I don't regret any of it, but we were pretty damn busy when you look back.
Yeah, even the power projection course curriculum went through a lot of changes, if you remember.
Yeah.
Some of the events that were taking place, whether it was Falkland Islands War or the Iran-Iraq War, all of those activities fed into our view of the threat, and the power projection course, the lecture series, constantly undergoing advancement and change and new murder boards, and and obviously we were all spreading that work around, but I'd say everything from the power projection curriculum, the power projection flying, and then to everyone's point, the draw to support outside of the school made it a machine. There's no doubt about it.
Were you an adversary? Like when you went to support, was there a dedicated adversary in the Navy at the time, or were you it?
There were designated adversaries in the Navy on both the East and West Coast.
Okay.
But when we would generally send small debts of ourselves. So I'll use Fallon and the Air Wing and Overland Air Superiority Training as an example. We'd send 3 or 4 of us up to Fallon to hook up with the Air Wing. We'd take them through a several-day series of lectures and flights, generally part task and usually around strike training, and then we would debrief the Air Wing and head back to Miramar together. So it was generally smaller groups of us or singles. I mean, there were times that 1 or 2 of us would go out for that kind of support, and it was a combination of bringing the academics with us and sharing them, or some of the flying work. And we did both of it, and we helped train some of the adversary squadrons in the Navy, if you recall. I mean, we would provide support to that.
I want to thank you all for this hour. I mean, this has been incredible. This is all awesome. I'm glad we got everybody together. Sorry we couldn't get everybody, but this is way more than I ever hoped. It's really cool. So, Tech, Secks, Boa, Circus, Rat, Oregon, thank you so much.
You guys look
Pleasure.
great.
Pleasure.
Good seeing all you guys.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Good
See you
to see
guys.
everybody.
Not worthy,
Good
man.
seeing you.
I want to thank Oregon for putting this together and getting everybody together. I know it was a lot of work. It was really awesome to be able to sit down and talk with everybody. It really is a big part of naval aviation history now because the movie was so instrumental in so many people's lives and careers and how people view fighter pilots. So I hope you guys enjoyed these interviews. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.